President Xi Jinping is planning to travel to Russia to meet with his counterpart Vladimir Putin.
More and more Chinese are waking up. Xi Jinping's visit to Russia hurts China's interests. What happens when the leader of the world's most populous country makes a trip to one of the largest neighbours? The answer may surprise you. What is the agenda of Xi Jinping's recent visit to Russia, and why it has many Chinese citizens waking up to the harsh reality that their country's interests may be at stake? Join us as we delve into the complex geopolitical landscape of East Asia and uncover the hidden secrets and tensions lurking just below the surface. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has raised concerns among many countries around the world, including China. As one of the major powers in the world, China has been closely monitoring the situation and has called for a peaceful resolution to the crisis through dialogue and diplomacy. Despite China's calls for peace, some Western media outlets have interpreted Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Russia as a sign that China is choosing sides in the conflict and is siding with Russia. The interpretation is not entirely accurate and may be based on a misunderstanding of China's foreign policy and its relationship with both Russia and Ukraine. Indeed, China and Russia enjoy cordial relations with one another. However, China and Ukraine are also key partners, and good relations have existed between the two countries for a large amount of time. Throughout the turmoil, China has been in dialogue with the Ukraine government. Both nations' heads of states have written to one another, and the two nations' foreign ministers have held face-to-face meetings as well as had multiple conversations over the phone. China and Russia are both becoming global powers, which makes their relationships all the more remarkable. Many people in China have compassion for Russia and are completely aware of the security demands that Russia has. What Russia really wants is for NATO to call a halt to its eastward expansion and to refrain from installing missile bases or deploying troops into the Ukraine. Russia desires a more secure border environment along its neighbouring territory. These are questions that can only be answered by the United States and NATO working together. According to The Viewpoint, the United States of America and the rest of the Western world have the key to finding a solution to the problem that is unfolding in the Ukraine rather than China. China is not to blame for the crisis in the Ukraine, nor is it a participant in the conflict in any way. The Western nations are the ones that are getting themselves into a lot of trouble with this situation. The purpose of Xi's trip to Russia will be to advance the cause for peace, and he will not be arming any side or encouraging either side to fight. The government of China has never sold guns to any of the warring parties or conflict areas, and they are not doing so now while the crisis is going on in Ukraine. On the battleground in Ukraine, the US is the single largest contributor to the military hardware. It has been supplying potentially fatal weaponry and continuously ratcheting up the tension. Even if it does turn out that rumours about China calling for ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine are true, on the heels of China's brokering an agreement on the resumption of diplomatic relations between Saudi and Iran, the White House is likely to respond that a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine is unacceptable. This is because China recently mediated an agreement on the resumption of diplomatic relations between Saudi and Iran. It is now abundantly evident that one of the parties desires to keep the war going while the other seeks to advance peace. There is optimism among certain Western media outlets that China will play a positive role. What could possibly be more productive than working to establish peace? Establishing a truce, putting an end to the war, and rebuilding the Ukraine motherland are currently the top priorities. But resolving contentious topics such as claims of war crimes is not the top priority at this time. Realistically speaking, it is vital that the killing of soldiers on both sides come to a halt, and that efforts made to resettle the millions of refugees who have been rendered destitute. Some politicians in the West are opposed to a high-level delegation from China visiting Russia for the primary reason that they do not wish for relations between China and Russia to get stronger, particularly in light of the conflict that is currently taking place between Russia and the Ukraine. This line of reasoning is completely unreasonable. The situation in Ukraine is unrelated to the relations between China and Russia in any way. Regardless of whether or not there is a crisis in the Ukraine, the leaders of China and Russia will continue to conduct regular exchanges and reciprocal visits. During the previous decade, Xi has paid 8 separate visits to Russia and has held 40 separate meetings with President Putin. The foundation for China and Russia's amicable collaboration in the political, economic and cultural spheres is quite strong. In this new era, it is the fundamental interests of the people of both China and Russia to strengthen and broaden the scope of the comprehensive strategic cooperation that exists between the two nations. China operates independently in the world and prioritizes maintaining peace in its foreign policy. It's irrational to believe that Xi's visit to Russia is about picking sides given the current political climate. His trip is an unremarkable exchange between two independent countries, and as such it will not be impacted by the current precarious state of affairs on a global scale. Before offering criticism, leaders in the West need to look further than their own ideologies. Some people in the US are of the opinion that China and Russia are becoming closer to one another, which demonstrates that the anti-China strategy implemented by Washington is failing. The strategic community in the US ought to consider the reasons why relations between China and the US have been like a yo-yo during this past decade. The 80s were sort of a honeymoon period for China and the US. Later in the 2000s and again in 2008 during the global crisis, China and the US worked together to combat terrorism. In the 2010s, China and the US were both referred to as stakeholders. However, relations between the nations are currently so strained that people have even discussed the possibility of a catastrophic armed confrontation. The US has attempted to control China throughout the years by engaging in trade and technology conflicts against China and by continually agitating China's interest in Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong and Taiwan. Here is what the United States has done to achieve this goal. The potential for peace and stability on both sides of the Taiwan Strait has been harmed as a result of the US's decision to sell sophisticated arms to Taiwan. This decision has also harmed the sovereignty and unification of China. In light of this, the US of America is seeking cooperation from China in order to resolve the problem in Ukraine. Because of this, a joke has been posted on the internet in China that makes fun of the US request to China, which reads as follows: "Please help me contain Russia so that I can better contain you in the future." China is a big economic power that has remained neutral throughout all the wars that have taken place over the previous 4 decades. On the basis of this lone criterion, China is the only major Western nation that values and prioritizes maintaining peace. Observers who follow China's diplomacy are aware that China has lately put forward the concept paper on global security initiatives and China's position on the political solution to the Ukraine crisis. The goals of a large number of developing countries and individuals who are committed to maintaining peace in the world are reflected in China's foreign policy. China has demonstrated time and time again that it will always take the side of peace. It's the only country among the major countries that have consistently suggested a political solution to the conflict in Ukraine. The US and the rest of the Western world should put their faith in China's experience and support the country's recommendations if they want the Ukraine situation to be resolved. What are your thoughts on China? Do comment below and let us know. Well, that's all we have for today. We'll be back again with more videos. Until then, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.